So a very good morning to you all, and welcome to RegTech New York. My name's Ian Phillips, and I'm very honored to be able to be talking to you today. I was here last year as well, and hopefully I'm going to expand on what we talked about last year and talk a little bit more about on the regulation side. And hopefully I'll give you some insights into one of the solution offerings HCLSoftware has actually been building in the background, and we're going to be hearing from Mark a little bit about some real-life experiences in the payment space and and how the clients are perceiving it and how the implementations are going. So firstly, over the last couple of years, the pandemic has changed the way we live our lives and how we do business. And the future of our economy and our technology isn't just digital anymore. It's really digital plus. And as HCLSoftware, we believe that you need to have this integrated harmony with the evolving hyper-connected environment where technology and people can come together and you can connect organizations so you can work and communicate in a much more effective manner. So a little bit about HCLSoftware, just so that for the people that haven't actually heard about us, we are among the most top 25 software companies by revenue worldwide. I think Ritesh and them alluded that in the panel discussion. We have a very wide range of products, from financial management to human resources to basically everything in between. And today I'm going to focus down a little bit more on our AI and our emerging market technologies that we're going to be talking about, how we help businesses increase efficiencies and meet those operational resiliency regulations. Just as a note, we have a booth outside. We're very proud. We've actually just partnered with Ferrari. If you're watching F1 on the screens, you'll see the Ferrari car with the HCL logo on. So do stop by the booth. We do take clients to the races, so it's a great incentive for you to actually go and visit the team out there. But I hope today's talk will help you with some insights and inspire some action within your businesses around observability and around operational resiliency. Now, I'm going to be intertwining two concepts together today. I'm going to be looking at observability and operational resiliency. And you've heard these terms probably a lot in the market. And a lot of companies claim to have solutions around each of these topics. And as you actually heard on the stage with the panelists, there's no one solution that fits all. But what we want to try and do is explain to you how intertwined these two topics are for achieving operational efficiencies within your organizations. So firstly, observability. Just to recap on it, refers to the ability to monitor and gain insights from the internal workings of a system or process. And this is often achieved through the collection of analysis of data and metrics and logs. Very, very simple. But in today's context, I really want to just hone in on that observability is a critical tool for understanding impact. And I think that's the key word, impact, about how when things happen within your business with a product or a failure, understanding that impact is important. Now, operational resiliency, on the other hand, is all about the ability for a business to recover from disruptions or unexpected events, while maintaining your essential functions to be able to continually run your business. And that's very key what the regulators are after at the moment, being able to maintain your essential functions and ensure you're not disrupting that end client. So my message really today is about underscoring the idea about how observability and operational resilience needs to not be viewed as standalone, and how they intersect and intertwine and if you don't view them together and you don't take a consolidated strategy, your ability to be able to do better decision making is actually hampered, and you don't see those clear goals within your organization for better resilience when disruptions take place. And again, hopefully Mark will talk a little bit about his experience on that as we go along. So now, I often, when I'm sitting in front of boards, CEOs, they ask me the question about how do we stay off the the page of the front. How do we stay off the Wall Street Journal, the front page of the Wall Street Journal, in a negative way? They like being there in a positive way, obviously. But it's interesting, and you need to be able to manage risk, and you need to be mitigating risk all the way through, because if you're not able to do that, you are going to end up on the page of the on the page of the Wall Street Journal. So, and to be competitive in this landscape, if you haven't got this end-to-end view of your business services, and you can't identify where your vulnerabilities are, and detect anomalies, and proactively address the problem, you're going to fail. Because as the saying goes, if you don't know, you don't know. And if somebody then does something upstream, which will manifest itself slowly all the way through your downstream processes, you do end up on that Wall Street Journal. And you do end up on with negative publicity. And the question is, why? And you probably don't even understand why it's actually happened, because you just haven't been able to actually see it within your business. So it's very important getting that holistic view. And I think we referred to it, I think Ritesh on the stage actually referred to it earlier on, going, you need to see end-to-end nowadays, because our landscape is rather complex. I was going to jump back one. There we go. Good, it's moving by itself. It's great. So a little bit about regulation. Because depending on where you're in the world, regulation is called, especially operational resiliency, is called slightly different. In the EU, we've got the word DORA, which is the Digital Operational Resiliency Act. And that's the EU regulations, and they aim to be able to strengthen operational resiliency for the financial services sector to ensure continuity of critical services. And they are very much focused on the technology aspect of the financial services. So the EU very focused on that area, and that's their DORA regulation. In the UK, as we're not part of the EU anymore, I'm from London, we have what we call the FCA, the Financial Conduct Authority, and the PRA, which is the Prudential Regulatory Authority, which works side by side. And they describe operational resiliency as the ability for firms and financial sectors as a whole to prevent, adapt, respond, recover, and learn from operational disruptions, but look beyond technology aspect. So they've taken a slightly different road. They're actually saying it needs to encompass everything. Now, in the US, you have obviously the Fed. And you haven't actually got a single operational resiliency regulation as like the DORA or the FCA has. However, everything that is covered in DORA and in the FCA, FCA or PRA regulations at the moment is already covered in existing US regulation. Especially, it's all under the regimes of governing business continuity and resolution planning. So if you look through there, for instance, you'll be able to see you need to define important business services, and how to protect them is integral to the resolution planning regulations that apply to US and non-US banks. So, and we've done a bit of a table which outlines all the different areas there. But if you see, it's pretty clear across all of them at the moment that if you need to identify those important business services. You need to understand the critical chain of events that happen within those business services. And you need to be able to set measures and tolerances for each one of them. And you need to ensure that you remain within those tolerances with testing. And that is pretty clear from all the regulation when you actually read it. Now, a little bit about the timeline around this as well. So given the developments of DORA and obviously the enhancements in the US Fed on the standards, it's clear that it's important. And it has been important since 2022 at the moment when it started. But what's the timeline? When do you need to actually have done something? Because most organizations wait for that last minute and then they start acting on regulation. Well, actually, you've got until 31st of March 2025. However, and this is the big however, they're expecting you to be well on your way. They're expecting you to have already mapped all those business services, made the investments you need to be able to stay within those tolerances, and they expect you to be testing that you can actually comply with those tolerances as well. So don't wait until 31st of March 2025. I know it feels like it's a long way away. They're expecting incremental updates from 2022 to 2025. And you need to be able to demonstrate that as well within your area. I think it's probably good at this point. I'll stop over here and I'll hand over to Mark for to hear his experience, and then I'll come back again and we'll talk a little bit about how we pull it all together. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you, Ian. Pleasure to be with you all here today. Let me just make sure my slides are where they need to be. So the importance of operational resiliency. So look, we're at RegTech, obviously. It's often important to understand the history with regulation in order to understand kind of what's upcoming and what's new. So I'm sure everybody in the room has some concept of GDPR. Now, I argue that GDPR was probably one of the most transformational regulations in the payment and regulated spaces probably in the last 20 years. And it did that really because of two reasons. The first reason was it really started to put the customer first. Customer data, customer privacy, human rights laws associated with customer data and privacy were put at the forefront of what companies and corporations ultimately were doing. That didn't really exist before. And the second reason it was transformational is it had real teeth. So many of you probably knew it was drafted in the 2016 timeframe, but in the 2018-2019 timeframe when it was finally enacted, a lot of corporations got hit with big multi-million-dollar fines to the hundreds of millions of dollars in some cases. And it was amazing to watch how quickly the industry ultimately attempted to respond to that, but making sure they were compliant. And now you can't go to any website pretty much on the internet and not be hit right in the face with a pop-up of here's our cookies, here's what we're doing with our data, here are the data points, and pretty much putting control back in the consumer's hands to be able to decide how they want to interact with that. I highlight that because a lot of the regulation that Ian spoke to, regardless of the region you're in, I kind of refer to as a GDPR for DR, for disaster recovery. It's transformational in that it isn't just about the corporations anymore. It is now about the customers as well, too. I would imagine everybody in the room here would have some concept of what they would do if a technical system went down. Here's exactly what our company would do. Here's exactly what I would do as part of that process. I imagine if I similarly asked the same about cybersecurity, denial of service attacks, breaches, whatever you want to call it, attack vectors, I would imagine many in the room would also be able to say, here's exactly what I'm going to do as part of this process, here's what our company's going to do, and we're going to kind of tackle it that way. But what's missing in that? What are you hearing me say? I, me, we, us. What you're not hearing there is the them and the journey of the ultimate customers. And that's where this regulation is going to be transformative. It's going to mandate that you think customer. If you leave with one thing that I said today, customer, 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 that's going to be the big piece. But it's going to mandate that you not only understand the activities of your own ecosystems, but you understand the journeys and the personas of your customers as well, too. You're going to have to set thresholds. You're going to have to set not only your RTOs and your RPOs, your recovery time objectives, and your recovery point objectives for your organization, but you're going to have to do it for your customers as well, too. And you're going to have to be able to measure all of that, to Ian's point, which, again, is why I consider it pretty transformational. So with that in mind, I won't spend too much time on this slide. I've been in the payment space for 20 years. So regardless what I can jam into a single slide about making payments from complex to simple, there's really nothing simple about payments. And I think you could probably say the same about a lot of different industries, and I'll come on to that in a little bit here. But ultimately, because we're going to have to conform to this regulation, because we're going to have to put our customer first, you have to take these ecosystems, whether it be payments, whether it be insurance, whether it be medical care, whether it be gaming, whether it be travel, and attempt to make that as simple as possible in a very short duration. These undertakings, at least in payments, and it's kind of represented here by these 3 individual flywheels and how they interact together, there are a ton of different variables. In the process of collecting a payment, there are different mediums. You've got your physical mediums, you've got your digital mediums, you've got your physical servers, you've got your digital servers, you've got a whole bunch of security that wraps all of that, but then you also have all these different, some might describe as black boxes, of different corporations or vendors that you partner with that you don't know exactly what these guys are doing. You send them something, you get something back. Well, as part of the regulation, you're going to have to start to understand the thresholds of exactly what's coming in and what's coming out in order to meet, again, some of the regulation that was being described. So my last slide, and I love this slide, no words, just a picture. So I think everybody knows what this is. It is obviously inside of a cockpit of an airplane, to my travel example. I had a friend from South Africa who told me it was a traffic control center, but I forgave him because he's South African. But in any case, some would argue, and I would argue, is probably one of the most complex monitoring systems known to man, the operation of an airplane, and all of the pieces associated with it. So, and I'll come to this question. So travel, again, like payments, very, very complex. When I've had conversations with people about preparing for the regulation, they often will flash something like this up to me on the dashboard, whether it's payments or whatever, and go, look, Mark, I got everything. I got all the monitoring right here. We're already set. We're ready to go. And my response to that is, are you sure? So just using the travel example, which, again, I appreciate because everybody understands, this is obviously exceptional at monitoring the airplane. What is it looking for? It knows about the wings. It knows about, obviously, the engines. It knows about the pressure. It knows about the temperature. And God knows how many other variables are considered as part of that monitoring dashboard. But again, what's missing? So all of that is the ecosystem of the airplane, but doesn't take into account the customer's journey through the airport, through travel to the final destination. So the examples that I often leverage through this use case is one is, okay, the weather. Well, you can't control the weather. You might be able to control the temperature of your engines, but you can't control the weather. How do you begin to control the uncontrollable? How do you begin to monitor that? Now, obviously, there's radar in here, and you get some situation of the weather, but the weather is much wider and bigger than just what the airplane can see in its few mile radius. What's the airport at the destination? What's the airport at the departure? All critical elements of the monitoring of the ecosystem. And then the other one, and probably the one that you'll see most on TikTok or YouTube or whatever, are the passengers on the plane. So in this ecosystem of the actual, co-pilot or the actual control panel, where does it monitor the behavior of the passengers on the plane? Now that is often, and many will say, one of the most impactful variables to a customer traveling the ecosystem here and having an enjoyable journey and being recognized. Well, there's no monitoring for that. But the regulation, again, is going to make you think customer, customer, customer. So how do you start to look at some of those variables and bring in some of those variables? Again, my point here is to not say, look, there is no such thing as monitoring. Nobody's monitoring is good. This is some of the most state-of-the-art systems in the entire world. But you have to start to think outside the box. If you're not asking yourself the question, what is my customer thinking? What is my customer experience? The regulators are going to probably drop the hammer very similar to what they did with GDPR in the 2018 and 2019 timeframe. So I'll turn it back over to Ian here to let him continue. But ultimately, it's critical to figure out how you make the complex simple, as I showed you in the previous slide, but then you're always putting the customer variables as part of your ecosystem and your measurability.
Thank you, Mark. That was fantastic to hear from the customer to actually understand some of the complexities within the environment there. So I'm going to quickly touch on a little bit of the solution offering. We do have a booth outside, so do stop by there as well. But just to let you know, from an HCLSoftware, we're spending a ton of money on this, on AI and automation pieces alike in a number of different areas and different products. Last year when I was over here, I actually talked about the Enterprise Command Center. We just launched this, we brought this in, and we were talking all about how you actually get visibility end-to-end within your organization. And I actually spoke quite a lot on the digital twin aspect of saying, where you have human elements within your business, and you need to start looking about how you actually bring automation there. We introduced the concept of the digital twin, about how you bring that human element back into the AI side. Today I'm going to focus a little bit more on the regulation compliance piece, but if you are interested in the AI digital twin, just talk to the chaps outside. They'll happily give you some more explanation around that. It is quite intuitive. We work with a lot of startups around that. So let's just talk a little bit about regulatory controls. A lot of your companies will have some sort of regulatory controls repository, or you will have something that will be called operational controls repository, or you'll have one or the other or both. Some of you may not have them either. If you do not have one, please do talk to us. We are working with some very clever startups at the moment, which are using AI to be able to bring in and actually digitize the regulation documents, segment them into the different various policies or directives, and then actually provide the evidencing, or not provide, but actually help define the evidencing pieces around that. Whatever you've got, we will interact with, and I'm actually going to build the whole slide just so that I'm not clicking around there. So whatever repository you've actually got, we'll take a feed of those into our observability platform. And that's key because we've now realized with the new regulation that the operational controls that you're using on your day-to-day basis actually form a lot of the regulational needs that you need to be able to report back to the regulator. And you need to have control within your operations pieces to be able to feed those back. So we want to be able to shortcut that journey between what your compliance officers are doing, searching for data, and what you're generally doing on a day-to-day basis to be able to ensure that your operations are actually running. And we want to be able to evidence those back. So we believe that if you're able to pull in those regulations into a controls repository, if you've got those, and bring them into an observability platform, and you're able to actually join them in this end-to-end chain of events and actually place those controls where they're actually sitting within your business, you understand impact. And that impact is the key thing that we're actually after, because if you can understand impact, you get ahead of the game. And 90% when I talk to customers, if you ask them about incidents and things like that have happened in there, or why they've been on the front page of the Wall Street Journal, it's generally because their customers were calling them before they actually knew they had a problem. And how do you avoid that? The only way you can avoid that is to understand where impact sits within your operations. And to be able to do that, you need to have this end-to-end view. You need to see when something's going wrong so you can get ahead of it. Generally, IT guys have been excellent at this for their little bit of the world. Unfortunately, they don't see the whole bigger picture. They don't see what's happening end-to-end. So they try and firefight in their area, but actually the problem manifests itself over 3 or 4 different process steps. So you really need to understand those chain of events to actually make this work. And I'm going to give you an example of this, and it's part of the regulation. So step 1 is you need to be able to understand that business service. So I've taken a payments example over here. We've got the payments example of, let's say, it's a same-day credit transfer that has to happen. That's a key service that you're providing to your customers. You need to be able to ensure that that service is broken down and that you have a set of measurable controls there. Now, as Mark said, how do you understand what a measurable control is? Well, the regulation will tell you you need the service, you need to understand the business service, you need to have the controls. I like to define a control as, what good looks like. When I actually talk to operations guys, I say to them, what keeps you awake at night? When you wake up in the morning, how do you know if you're going to have a good day or a bad day? Because those are the things you want to know that you're actually measuring along the line. So we want to be able to assign those controls at each step of the way, and we want to be able to aggregate those up and stream the data, and we want to be able to ensure that you can see the impact. And there's always three things that you need to understand when you want to know impact. You want to know who's affected, okay? Which customer. You want to know how many of them are affected, and you want to know how much is affected. So how many dollars are at risk there as well. Because your action that you take will be proportionate to understanding those three questions. And it is just as simple as that when we talk about observability across the whole landscape. So to take a little example over here, what controls we'd put in place, I've put a couple up there, and you'll notice that some of them are technical, some of them are purely businessy focused. So you need to be able to look at both sides of the coin all the way through. But it's just being able to leverage that existing investment you've got, because a number of these will have already been monitored within your environment. You're doing it today. You're just not able to bring it together to be able to see it in context, because each system is doing their own piece of the puzzle. So we really want to, and it's a big piece there, we want to have a thin layer to bring it together, reuse all that investment so that you can actually get on and actually do the reporting. And then finally, we've created this flexible solution as well there with fully customized dimensions, which means you can define it the way you need to report it, depending on the industry you're in. So we've gone very industry agnostic. We've made it flexible so that depending on how you need to report back, you can. So you can take, you can see the business services affected by the regional health or the country, or simply split them by financial resiliency, tech resiliency, or transactional resiliency. Very easy to be able to define those and then sum them back up and actually report them. Everything is flexible, everything is exportable. You can put it and graph it and chart it in any different means you want. We've got a whole bunch around that as well. But really, the key here today is we want to bring the vision that we need to close the gap between what the compliance teams are doing, what your operations teams are doing, and what IT is doing, and bring them all together into one area where they can actually see what is happening so that your business can be more efficient and obviously more resilient in a market that is changing faster than we can imagine. Let's go back one more. So as I mentioned, there is going to be a demo by one of our pre-sales engineers, Paul, who will be doing it on the demo stage. So have a look, ask him lots of questions, and any other questions, come to the booth and have a chat to us. And I think that's about time, and thank you for listening.